now, coming to you live, the Fantasy Oddcast, starring host used to be sober and guests K-Zap and Feta Cheese. Welcome to the Fantasy Oddcast.
And welcome to first episode of Fantasy Oddcast. I'm your host, used to be sober, with guests K-Zap 711 and Feta Cheese. Three best friends getting together and doing what we do best: bicker, talk, and give advice about fantasy football. No, we're not professionals. Yes, we are winners. We have two former champions here from this previous year. Let's kick things off the right way. We're going to start off first and foremost talking about wide receiver depth, and Chris is going to spearhead this conversation. Take it away.
Hey, all right, what's up, guys? So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about wide receiver depth and why it is a dumb decision to take a wide receiver in the first two rounds that are not named Antonio Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, or Odell Beckham. All right, everyone wants to get high on all these wide receivers. They're boomer bust type players. Even a guy like Julio Jones can put up a 30-point week, but next week can put up 4 points. I don't think that's a great strategy to win a championship when there's other guys there that you could take. This year especially, there's so much movement. There's a lot of guys that people are going to sleep on that will be available in like the 4th, 5th, 6th round and after. You have guys like Allen Robinson, Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Eric Decker, people that are going to be slept on. Golden Tate's there, another guy. People are going to reach on Tyreek Hill. People are going to reach on Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs for what they did last year. But a lot of value is going to be found in like the 5th, 6th, or 7th round in wide receiver depth. So I don't think it's a great decision to go in the first couple rounds and reach for one of these guys that you think is going to have an outstanding year. Antonio Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, or Odell. What are your thoughts, guys?
And I agree with you. I think if you're going to go in the first or second round, I think first round is still really high with the amount of running backs that are going to be on the board and go off the board. They're a hot commodity this year. That being said, second round, if you're not Antonio Brown, if you're not Odell Beckham, if you're not DeAndre Hopkins, even second round may be too early to pick up one of these guys like Julio when you have an opportunity to catch your Christian McCaffreys, your Dalvin Cooks. Some of your running backs are still going on the board and put up high value.
Exactly. There's less depth at running back, and they're more valuable as a position, especially if you're in a league where you can run 2 running backs and then a flex at running back. If you can stack your team with 3 running backs, it's such a valuable commodity midway through the season to be able to either trade one of those running backs for a stud wide receiver or to stack 3 running backs all season long to go and win you a championship. And I think that's a great strategy to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's the thing too, is like you said, deeper in the rounds, you're going to find your wide receivers that are going to put up consistent value. There may not be the home run hitters that are Antonio Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, and stuff like that. But that being said, you're still going to find them deeper in the round, and they're going to get you your double-digit points. They're going to be a perfect flex option, if not a WR2 for you. And people are going to get so quick to jump at these other bigger receivers that are really not as big as you think they are, and they're equivalent at the end of the year when you look in total fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, like Devontae Parker and Will Fuller, Eric Decker, they're going to be available in those late rounds, and the 6th, 7th round. If you think about the running backs that are going to be available there, it maybe be like a Tariq Cohen, some secondary back that's going to split a lot of time and might have a big game here or there. They're not going to be consistent players, whereas your wide receivers, you can get consistency down in those late rounds. And, if you can get that, it's better to stack up top with guys that are going to be, those high teens, low 20s running backs that can, go and win you week in, week out. Remember, you're not trying to win 1 week in fantasy football. You're trying to win the whole season.
Exactly. What do you think, Nick?
I think I agree with all the points that were made. I was going to just add that I think that the drop off from running back from the elite guys down, pretty much just reiterating what you guys have said, is much greater at running back than it is at the wide receiver position. So if you're a sharp player and in your drafts, you'll draft accordingly and make sure that you have adequate depth before you enter the late rounds.
So you brought up a good point that there is a big drop off between your top tier running backs and your lower end running backs. But that's not a crystal clear decision for every team out there. And you bring up the point, and you want to talk about today position battles, Nick. Why don't you broaden that for us? Help us understand what position battles do you think are biggest coming out of camp, and who do you think is going to rise up and above in their position battle?
So for position battles, I'm mainly talking about the fantasy backfields and implications for stuff that's still going on right now. Position battles out in Tampa Bay between Ronald Jones and Barber there. You also have a position battle in Seattle between Carson and the rookie Rashad Penny. So it's just interesting situations to look out for fantasy. I even think in some of the bigger situations with bigger backs, I think we talked about Dalvin Cook and Latavius Murray, just situations where a guy's not going to get all the work, and there's a new face or a guy that was injured last year in Dalvin Cook's case, something to look at.
No, I agree. I think somebody like
I mean, even like Doug Martin and Marshawn Lynch in Oakland,
Sure.
like who's going to get the split touches there? I mean,
Especially with how high Gruden is on Muscle Hamster.
Yeah, I mean, if he's going to steal touches, Marshawn Lynch might be, the LeGarrette Blount from 2 years ago, where all he's doing is getting goal line work, where Doug Martin is getting the 1 and 2 carries, in the series. So
I think we'd be crazy not to also talk about AP here because
he's thrown right in the
DC
mix now. Yeah,
with Juice gone.
I mean, yeah, he can definitely win out a job over Samaje Perine or Rob Kelly.
Right.
Adrian Peterson might have some stuff left in the tank. I don't think he's a great guy. If he's there in the 4th or 5th round, it's an interesting pick there to be able to stack your team with him. And it's kind of a flip of a coin where you could take the risk. And if it doesn't work out, if you have 2 running backs that you stacked in the 1st and 2nd round, like you should, then, it might be a good payoff.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, here's the thing about AP. Let's talk AP and his elite status as a running back. I mean, we know he's going to be a Hall of Famer.
Former elite status.
But here's the thing. Michael Jordan at the end of his career is still Michael Jordan. Yeah, maybe he's not putting, your 1990 Chicago Bulls numbers up, but he's going to be able to produce. He has the vision. He has the talent. He has the know-it-all of the field and a leadership. I think he makes an impact there in a team that needs that leadership.
I mean, with Alex Smith there, they could be controlling the clock a lot. I mean, he could get some volume carries, but I think he's old. He's over the hump, and he's going to be splitting a lot of touches with those other guys. Like, let's not forget, Chris Thompson is there, going to be stealing the 3rd down work.
Would you feel comfortable in a bye week running AP out there if he's getting 15, 20 carries a week?
I know I would, because it's AP.
Yeah, it's depending on what other options are out there, and.
But it's the same reason why we're people in our league and other leagues are still drafting Marshawn Lynch. Like, maybe Marshawn Lynch isn't what he was in full-time beast mode, but the guy still has that spark and still shows flashes of greatness, and you need that.
Well, he is and always has been, like, very touchdown dependent, and I think Adrian Peterson is going to be the same way. I think he had the one big game with Arizona last year. He looked good in the preseason game over this last week. He was averaging 5 yards a carry. So if he can replicate that or something close to that, then he might be pretty productive. And if you can get, like I said, if you can get him in the 5th round, then that might be a steal.
Yeah, well, I mean, Nick, you didn't mention it before, but I think someone, unless you did and I missed it, but Royce Freeman. I mean, there's a guy.
Yeah, that was one that I had in my notes. I think it's looking more like Royce Freeman's job. But yeah, there's a couple of other guys there that are interesting. You talk about Devontae Booker.
Yeah, and also we haven't mentioned Kerryon Johnson over there in Detroit. I mean, that's a mixed bag of backfield there. But he by mid-season could be the lone shareholder for all early down and second down running.
Is going to be vulturing a lot of stuff from him.
Well, yeah, I agree. Touchdowns probably, yes.
Matt Patricia being there, like he knows what LeGarrette Blount can bring into the table. Like, the goal line work with Stafford being a keeper and on the goal line gets a lot of touchdowns, jumping over lines, and with LeGarrette Blount there now, they have a presence to not have to throw the ball.
I like the talent a lot with Kerryon Johnson, but there's just too many bodies there. I mean, for God's sakes, you have Amir Abdullah still there.
Yeah.
I think Zach Zenner might still be there.
But
There's
somebody's
Theo
going to
Riddick. People
rise.
forget about Theo Riddick. I don't know. I mean, I think they might just be comfortable giving carries to everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know if any one guy's going to emerge there.
That's one of those position battles that's going to go through. I think the advice we give our listeners here and viewers is going to be somebody like Royce Freeman, somebody like AP. You're really going to want to keep your eye on, and really think harder on your draft, because those are guys that are looking like to get majority carry at their teams.
They're guys that you might have to take a look at.
Yeah.
Depending on how you draft.
But we talk about LeGarrette Blount. He's obviously still in the picture. The guy isn't going away anytime soon. That brings up the point of new homes, new opportunities, new beginnings, right? And I want to talk a little bit about, and have each of you, choose and who you think in their new home is going to have the biggest fantasy impact or uptick. And I'm going to start it off. In my opinion, I think Kirk Cousins this year is going to have an uptick in value, both as a quarterback. I think he's being undervalued right now, where he's being drafted. But I think he's going to have an uptick in value. I think you're going to see his stats go up across the board in yardage and in touchdowns, decrease in interceptions. And I think it's going to be due part to the offensive scheme that they have there with their running backs, and with more of a tighter, gelled wide receiver core. I see him becoming somebody that I wouldn't call irrelevant before, but you reached and let him drop to you, or other people reached and picked other guys, and he dropped to you in your past drafts. This is a guy that you want to keep your eye on if he does drop to you in the rounds you're still looking for a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I think there's going to be an uptick in production this year. I mean, he's definitely not a guy that you're going to go and reach and take if he falls to you. It's not a bad option to have, and we'll talk about the quarterbacks in a little bit. But I think he's going to be productive there. He has definitely more weapons around him, and he's going to have plus possessions because he's playing with a much better defense on the other side.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go quarterback too. I think Case Keenum is going to be a guy to watch out for this year. He's in Denver now. He's got a ton of talent around him. I think he kind of emerged last year as identifying himself as a starting quarterback in this league and not just a backup. And with Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, they can be really dangerous over there and have a high-flying offense in Denver again.
Nice. What do you think, Dickie?
For me, it's Trey Burton, I think. Coming over, leaving the Eagles, getting out from behind Zach Ertz. He's shown us what he can do in small samples, and now gets to be the primary target, possibly one of the primary targets for Trubisky. They've already shown a really good rapport all preseason, and I think it's somebody that you should consider, and I'm going to consider later in drafts after the big names go off the board.
Yeah, I'm with you on Trey Burton for sure. One, he's talented.
Sure.
Two, think about Chicago's offenses and how much a role tight ends have always played in the Chicago offenses. I mean, every year their tight end does emerge. I mean, not to say that's because they haven't had good wide receivers, but they tend to flock to tight ends more often, kind of like, someone like the Steelers do, back with the Heath Miller days. Baltimore Ravens always have done it too. So
yeah, I mean, the young quarterback's best friend is a tight end. And so with Mitch Trubisky, he lost Zach Miller last year to a freak injury, and he didn't have that all year. We might see Trey Burton actually be really productive. I mean, I'm still not looking for him anywhere earlier than, the 10th round, but it's definitely one of those later guys, if you miss on a big guy, that you could definitely, steal and be productive for you.
Oh, yeah, I agree. 100%. Well, let's move on we talk about new faces, right? We've mentioned a couple new faces here and there. One big new face that everybody has talked about and still is talking about today is Saquon Barkley. What are your thoughts, Chris? You've throwing this word bust around, and I want to make it clear what you mean by bust, because in my opinion as a Giants fan, there's no way this dude's going to be a bust.
So I put bust in parentheses just because I think people are overvaluing him. He's not coming into the greatest situation in terms of running the football. The Giants have been really towards the bottom of the NFL for the last couple of years. The offensive line is not the greatest. They brought in some new people, but they're young, and who knows if they're going to be able to protect him. People want to compare him to Zeke coming out of college, and he's just not in the same situations. You forget, like, Zeke came in behind the number one offensive line in football, and he got to run behind them. The year before Zeke got in,
Darren McFadden was there.
McFadden was there, and he was a 1,000-yard rusher behind that line. Now you insert a guy with the talent of Ezekiel Elliott. All of a sudden, he's the league leader in rushing for that year in his rookie year. I don't think Saquon Barkley's coming into the same situation. I think there are a lot of other mouths to feed there. You have Odell Beckham, you have Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard is there. They're in an offense that likes to pass the ball more so than run the ball. Now he is dynamic out of the backfield as a pass catcher, but I think people are just overvaluing him where he's going to be drafted. I think there are better options. I don't see him getting 25, 30 touches a game. Whereas you get a guy like Leonard Fournette, who's going to get fed. Like, the offense is revolved around running the football there and playing good defense.
Well, I mean,
and people are going to draft Saquon Barkley over Leonard Fournette, and I think that's just a mistake. I think there's a lot of people. I said this before to you guys. If someone drafts Saquon Barkley at number 5 and you're sitting at number 6, you are thanking that guy because someone great just dropped to you. Whether that be a Melvin Gordon, outside the top 4 running backs, DJ, Ezekiel Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, and Todd Gurley. I think there's a lot of other guys there that should go before Saquon Barkley, and I see him going in a lot of drafts that are in like the 5th to 8th pick. Whereas I think he's a first rounder. I just think he's more of like an 11th or 12th pick, maybe even early 2nd round. I think that's a little stretch. I think he's going to go in the 1st round. He deserves that spot. I just think there are other guys that should go before him and that will end up being more productive at the end of the season than he is. Well, so that's the reason I'm just calling him a bust.
So, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think he's being put up on a pedestal. Rightfully so. It's done because of what's happened in the past. We've had 2 consecutive years of NFL leading rushers that were rookies. So I'm not saying he can come in and do that, and that's going to happen. But history has shown to repeat itself multiple times, so I do agree. But
he's just not in the same situation as Kareem Hunt was last year, Ezekiel Elliott was the year before. He's just not. There's other mouths to feed there. Saquon Barkley. It's not going to be the Saquon Barkley show.
Well, no, I agree, and I agree with you.
It was Ezekiel, and last year it was a Kareem Hunt show.
Well, it wasn't really the Kareem Hunt show. It just happened to be that this guy snuck in and was able to perform at a high level because he had other weapons around him. Everybody knew Tyreek Hill was a big threat. Everybody knew Alex Smith,
no one else.
Travis Kelce. And so guess who able to sneak in that? I'm just saying I think he's worth the pick. If you're in that 5 pick and you're a Giants fan and you're a Penn State fan, you're really high on Saquon Barkley, you're not making a mistake by selecting him. I don't think so.
I mean, by no means am I saying he's not going to be. I think he's going to be a great player in this league for a long time. I just don't think the Giants are ready right now to be a run-first football team. And with a guy like Saquon Barkley, I think he needs volume to be able to have that explosive play every now and again because in the preseason so far, he's had some explosive runs, but his average after that has not been very good. And so he's a guy that needs the volume carries to be able to break that big one.
Yeah. I mean,
I just don't see them giving him the volume when you have other guys that are more established that Eli has more rapport with.
Yeah.
Plus, he tweaked his hamstring, so let's see how that figures out.
Everybody tweaks their hamstring in the NFL.
Best predictor of an injury is previous injury.
I mean, so here's the thing: defense is still got to shut him down. I mean, if he plays at 90% of what Le'Veon Bell does, 80% of what Le'Veon Bell does, the defense still has to try and stop a guy that's dynamic like that. And I think when watching the way he plays, you're finding that you've got a runner that's able to shift and make moves and see a field at a high level at early in his career like this. He's only going to get better. And maybe he starts off a little slow, or maybe he starts off with a bang. We'll see. But when we talk about defenses having to stop somebody like that, not every defense is going to be able to do that. And Nick, you wanted to talk about defenses. What are your thoughts on defenses? Where are you looking to try and pick up a defense in your draft? And when is it too early to pick up a defense?
So I think there are a couple ways to go about it. I think you can play the strategy of waiting, maybe with one of your last few picks of the draft and kind of grabbing the best of the bunch along with your kicker, or you can kind of take a more proactive approach, as we saw in years past, people taking the Seahawks Legion of Doom defense as early as, I don't know, high single digits, maybe middle of the fifth, sixth round. So for me, I mean, you can maybe fifth, sixth round is a little crazy, but right around the same time, you're probably starting to look for, you filled out your running back and your wide receiver depth, and you're trying to fill out tight end, you're trying to fill out those other spots, quarterback, where there is a lot of depth. I think if you are going to go with one of the higher end ones, you should probably choose the Jags. You should probably look at the Rams. Those are the types of teams, along with the Vikings. Those are the types of teams I think that are worthy of a higher end pick. Just some exciting opportunities there, I think, to put up a lot of points where people who have these crummier teams are obviously not investing a lot of draft capital there. So I'll shoot it back to you guys on what you think you are going to be doing when it comes to defense.
I mean, I've never been a big proponent on drafting early on defenses. I don't think it's a great strategy unless, like, you know, you're stacked up and you have like a third wide receiver and a third running back, and you're either you're going to wait on a quarterback or you're going to pick them up already. I'd rather go get a tight end than a defense in the 9th round.
Yeah, no, I agree with Chris. I think what I've done in the past and what I've done is try to do defense by committee and pick up the waiver wire on defenses based on matchups, and it's worked out here and there. There's a couple times where I've been able to grab a defense not early on, but earlier than I normally would, because it's a defense that I know has high value and high turnover ratios. They're able to knock the ball loose, steal the ball, maybe a couple punt returns here and there. You know, back in the day, you get your Chicago Bears defense when you had Devin Hester and you had Brian Urlacher, Mike Brown, guys that were turning the ball over, forcing turnovers, returning punts. You know, that's a different type of defense, and those are ones that you'd maybe jump a couple rounds higher than you normally do. But I'm with Chris on this one too, is jumping high for a defense like that when you have the availability to get maybe a higher tight end, like we talked about earlier, a Trey Burton, or, you know, maybe not your Kelce's and stuff because they're going to be gone a little bit earlier, but you're going to have that 6th, 7th round tight end that's high value that you could put in week to week.
Is there anyone from the not top group of defenses that you guys are interested in?
I mean, I'm a little biased to it because I'm a Jets fan, but I think the Jets have a solid defense this year. They're young. They made a lot of moves in free agency to bring in Jermaine Johnson, who had 6 interceptions last year. So I think they can get to the quarterback. I think Houston is another team that we need to keep our eye on. If J.J. Watt comes back healthy, him and Clowney are going to be just savage getting after the quarterback. If you're looking at teams that are going to score you a lot of points in fantasy for defense, you want sacks, you want interceptions, you want touchdowns, you want punt returns, all right? So it doesn't matter if they're getting 40 points scored on them, as long as they're getting, they have 2 interceptions and 4 sacks in that game, you're going to be coming out ahead. So I think that's a high turnover defense, but that's another thing to consider is a lot of people make the mistake every year on going after these, what we think just watching football are great defenses, but in fantasy, they're not that productive because they'll hold a team to 13 points by stopping drives, not by getting turnovers. So
yeah,
is there anyone you're keeping your eye on down there?
Yeah, I think the Chargers for the past couple of years have shown high turnover ratios. Yeah, they give up a lot of points and they give up a lot of yardage, but when it comes down to it, they're having a couple interceptions a game, fumble recoveries, turnovers, and sacks as well. And then obviously, I don't think it's anybody's surprise, but the Saints, I mean, they emerged as a good defense last year, and I think they're going to come back just as strong, if not a little bit stronger, learn from their mistakes against the Vikings at the end of the season last year. So that's another team I like in this draft. Other than that, you get a mixed bag. You're going to get teams that give up a ton of points here and then do a good defensive hold here with some turnovers and then give up another ton of points the next week. So
just do yourself a favor, wait till the 13th round and draft a defense and then play a rotational defense.
Play the matchups. Yeah.
Well, let's talking about taking a defense too early. I want to talk about taking a QB too early. I think it's something that nobody talks about because QBs, yes, they do make the most points in fantasy football for you, but you can in most standard leagues such as ours, you can only start one. You can have a ton on your roster if you want. That's fine if you want to play that game and block out your opponents, but you can only start one. And here's the thing that I'm seeing is a lot of people in these mock drafts currently are putting a lot of value in some of these quarterbacks, and they're taking them in the 4th round. And to me, I only have one person on my list that's worth snatching in the 4th round, and I think it's even a risky play to take him there based off a couple games we saw him last year, and that's Deshaun Watson. I think 5th round can still be too early, but depends. In a situation where you're in a keeper league and you have some keepers such as a running back or wide receiver 1 or 2 that is deeper in your draft than when you get to keep them, and they're already solidified on your team, you're not worried about trying to find another wide receiver or running back in the 5th round, maybe that's where you snag up a quarterback like Tom Brady or A-Rod or Cam Newton or Russell Wilson. But anything higher than that, you're taking away the opportunity to fill the depth at the one position that probably gets injured the most, and also the one position that's the most, or 2 positions that say they get injured the most, and 2 positions that are most inconsistent the deeper you get into your draft, and that's running back and wide receiver. Quarterbacks, there's 32 teams, 32 quarterbacks start. The top half of those quarterbacks are going to be decent. The top 3 will probably be elite, but the rest of them are all going to be in the same position, and they're going to give you the same value points across the board, and probably at the end of the season, they're going to be within 25, 50 points of each other, where, taking your Big Ben, you're taking your Phillip Rivers, who I'm high on this year. These guys are guys that are going to drop down and be available even at rounds 8, 9, possibly 10, depending on how your draft's going.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely a lot of depth there, and you can definitely go. I've used this strategy in the past, and you kind of have to feel it out on like where you are sitting by the 4th or 5th round in terms of your other players on your team. I will say this: I don't think it's ever too early to draft a quarterback. A couple, the year Peyton Manning had 50 touchdowns, I drafted him in the 1st round, just because I knew he was coming into a great system. I knew there's a lot of potential. He outscored every person by over 150 points that year.
And how'd you do in that fantasy season? Just for
I had 1 loss. I lost in the playoffs, but in the regular season, I only had 1 loss that year. You can go and make up for that later on once you have a guy solidified. If you're super confident in a quarterback, don't be afraid to just go and grab him. Like my strategy has always been, you want as many set it and forget it pieces in your lineup. So if you get a guy that, like an Aaron Rodgers, like a Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson's another guy that's up there, Drew Brees, they're set it and forget it. You're never rotating that guy out other than for a bye week. You don't want to get caught in a situation where you're having to play a quarterback based on matchup, and you run into a week where not only is he in a bad matchup, you have to go and fight other people for a waiver wire position and waste your waiver wire to go get a replacement quarterback. Or you do the strategy on, maybe in the 9th or 10th round, you go and draft 2 quarterbacks that you like, and you rotate them based on matchup. There's always that strategy, but I don't think it's too early to go in the 1st or 2nd round and go grab a guy like Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, if you really like him.
What do you think, Nick? I mean, what's your opinion? I know in our league here, and for those watching, Nick has an opportunity to keep Russell Wilson and lose his 7th round pick. But that factor put aside, where do you sit normally in drafting? Obviously, you got Russell in the 7th round last year.
Before I remembered that I did have the ability to keep Russell Wilson, I was looking to just wait. I don't think that anybody at the top is more valuable than somebody, just what you guys were talking about, is more valuable than a running back there that might have dropped down. I mean, there's too many other places you need to shore up on your team, and there's too many available quarterbacks that are going to, rookies that are going to emerge. Look at Deshaun Watson from last year. So I agree with everything that's been said so far. I mean, if your heart's desire is truly to have one of those big name guys, I mean, expect to pay for him, dearly, and expect him to probably have some issues at depth if you're going out there and you're grabbing somebody too early. If you run the risk of, I know I've done it in years past, going out there and grabbing a name like Cam Newton, 3rd round, and then he doesn't have a good year at all, and you wasted your 3rd round valuable draft pick on that.
I mean, he's still productive as a 3rd round draft pick. So you kind of have to look at that. There is a drop off.
Some of these guys bust. some of these guys bust really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's completely reasonable to go and wait in the 8th or 9th round, and you can probably get a guy like Phillip Rivers.
Absolutely.
Cam Newton might be there in the 7th round.
Maybe you can grab Phillip Rivers and Matt Stafford.
I think Matt Stafford and Matt Ryan in our draft. So you guys know, 2 years ago or last year they were in the 14th round, and Big Ben I think went in the 9th round. So they're gonna be there in your leagues, guys. And I just think the biggest thing you got to think about when drafting a QB early is, are you all in on this guy? And I mean, if you're a Green Bay Packer fan, you love Aaron Rodgers, you're all in on this guy. You better like him for more than just being a Packer fan. I mean, guy's got a great arm, great throw, but you waste that first round pick on him. Obviously, injuries can happen. He has a different receiving core. Things can change down seasons. It happens to everybody. Just know that you don't have somebody else to make up for that. And all those other QBs that you let go by deeper in the rounds that other people take aren't going to be there anymore. So I agree. I agree with what both you guys said.
There is some caution in drafting late. Last year I waited and I thought Derek Carr was going to have a great year. I drafted him in the 9th round, and he broke his back, and there's a lot of question mark coming back. But I had guys that were getting taken right before that, and there's a run on backup quarterbacks. So there are some people in your league that will run a 2-quarterback system, and they might go back to back in the 8th and 9th round and draft 2 quarterbacks based on what they do. So you're not always going to get the guy that you want. That's why I'm saying if you have a guy that you really, really want on your team, don't hesitate to just pull the trigger and just go get him in the 3rd or 4th round if that's what you like.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, here's the thing, too, is some of the QBs last year that may have underperformed. You got new coaching staff in there. Eli Manning, Derek Carr. These are guys. Garoppolo's got a new home, too, and new coach. I mean, these are guys that are going to produce because they've got great leadership above them. And I want to spend 1 to 2 minutes here just to get each of our opinion on who we think is going to be really producing better based on this coaching changes that have happened. And Nick, I'll let you kick this off on these new coaching regimes.
Well, as we've seen in years past, I think last year it was exemplified by McVay coming into the Rams organization and being a fantasy boon in production for players like Todd Gurley, going out there and just having a freak year. I think you're going to see the same thing this year with Norv Turner in Carolina, and Christian McCaffrey's CMC's continued development going to be used all over the place. I think they're talking about getting him the ball like 25 to 30 times a week. Now, he's a smaller guy, so if that, they do have, I think, the guy from the Broncos, CJ Anderson, who's come in now to soak up some of the volume that has been lost by Jonathan Stewart. But I think that he's somebody that's been flying up from what I've seen in kind of the mock draft scene, and is somebody you might want to look to as. I'd be fine with him as my number one, honestly, this year. I think Christian McCaffrey. I mean, I don't recommend not taking a running back first round, but he's somebody you could look to who's going to be, I think, eating a lot this year based on.
I mean, a lot of comparison between him and LaDainian Tomlinson when Norv Turner was in San Diego with him, and the success they had with that kind of shifty running back out of the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
And he's such a great receiver that he's going to be. I felt last year they just so underutilized him as a player.
Yeah.
And they gave Jonathan Stewart a lot of the touches, and didn't use Christian McCaffrey. And we might see this year an uptick in production from Christian McCaffrey, and with Norv Turner being there.
I mean, Chris, you talked about earlier being a front runner and being a little biased because of being a Jets fan. I'm a Giants fan. I gotta say, I'm excited for Shermer to be there. I think he is going to handle Eli Manning the way Eli Manning should have been handled with the leaving of Tom Coughlin. Tom Coughlin and Eli Manning relationship was amazing. He hasn't had that since Tom Coughlin left. And now Shermer's in there. I think we got a good coach, a smart coach, a good offensive coordinator. I think what you're going to see is Eli Manning and that offensive team, I wouldn't say mimic what the Vikings did last year, but you're going to see a better team morale and a better overall gelled offense this year.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you do much worse than Ben McAdoo having play call ability last year.
No.
He was awful for the Giants. He didn't utilize.
He was awful for the NFL, in my opinion. He was awful for the NFL. That's what
Schumer's going to come in and make an instant impact on Eli Manning. He's going to utilize him. He's going to utilize all giant weapons around Eli. So I think that's a great system. I'll bring up, I agree with Nick with Norv Turner is going to be a huge fit in Carolina, but I will say, I think with the Browns bringing in Todd Haley, look for a giant uptick in production from any running back that's playing there. I mean, you look at Nick Chubb, you look at Carlos Hyde. I think they're going to have extremely, extremely productive years.
I think it's a good handcuff duo. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's a good handcuff duo.
I think they're going to have a great season under Todd Haley's offense. I think it's going to take a lot of the pressure off of Tyrod Taylor or Baker Mayfield if Baker Mayfield starts. I don't think either one of them are being asked to go out there and win games by throwing the football. So I think there's going to be a lot of volume in the run game there. And so those are two players that I like that you can get very, very late in the draft.
Well, let's close up our first episode here, and for those tuning in, each week we're going to have a little segment at the end. This week's going to be bold predictions. We're going to throw in other ones there that are going to be, fantasy prediction of the week or fantasy dud of the week. Just stuff to get people thinking and make predictions. And don't be surprised if you see us make a couple little prop bets between each other too. We like to do that on the side. It's a lot of friendly competition. But that being said, today we're going to put down our bold predictions. These are predictions that are going to be made about the entire season, and some of the outcomes we're going to wait to see at the end of the season. So I'll let Nick start it off on his bold prediction. What do you got?
Ezekiel Elliott takes the rushing title, breaking Eric Dickerson's record for single season yards.
Chris, where are you at?
It's a bold prediction.
Thank you.
I think we're going to see the reemergence of Cam Newton. Cam Newton's, I think, is going to win the MVP this year. Wham, bam. Thank you, Cam.
I like it. My bold prediction, and again, being biased, I think Eli Manning ends in the top 3 fantasy points for quarterbacks. And as we know, for quarterbacks, that could be top 3 fantasy points, period. So that's all for the first episode of the Fantasy Oddcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm your host, Used to Be Sober, is again Feta Cheese and KZAP711 with us here. Follow me on Twitter at SoberUsed. Follow my YouTube channel, subscribe to it. We're putting these up weekly as well for you to follow for those who didn't see it live. And then on top of that, feel free, 4 days a week, I will be on Twitch to include this with the guys. And also PUBG and a multitude of other games at twitch.tv/used to be sober. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for watching. See y'all next week.
You end it?
Hey, great show.